Everything begins in a peculiar universe inhabited exclusively by women of various races. Upon waking up, Li Lin realizes he was left on the cold stone floor. Looking at his wrists bound by handcuffs, the young man notices he is in trouble. Apparently, he was taken to a dungeon and found himself surrounded by several scary guards. Trying to understand what was happening, he focuses his vision. Arya, the captain of the knights, demands to know how he invaded the place. An angry elf makes a threat, stating that her master will wipe out all the filthy humans. However, Arya steps harshly on the elf's face, warning that this was not the correct attitude. With that, the MC decides to tell the truth and admits to having traveled from another dimension. The captain, however, rejects the answer and stomps her right foot directly onto his face. Meanwhile, the elf cries in suffering as she notices her magic disappearing. The leader explains that such a degree of humiliation causes a painful reaction that weakens magical beasts. Considering this an ideal method to obtain data, she chooses to use the newcomer as a guinea pig. Forcing the young man against the floor, the knight demonstrates the proper way to interrogate. She determines that as soon as the beast recovers, the other guards must continue with the work. With a cold glare from top to bottom, Arya prepares for the next step. She steps firmly near the young man, ready to maintain the pressure. Pointing at him, the captain warns that his time to suffer has arrived. Suddenly, the young man is brutally thrown backward. Once again, the knight demands to find out how he entered the city-state. Seeking to justify himself, he remembers that he was taking a bath at his residence and suddenly appeared in a hot spring. Immediately after, someone struck him brutally. Pinned down, the young man reiterates that he is just a hero transported to this dimension. However, Arya demands that the magical creature keep quiet and reveal how he bypassed the security. Indignant, he tries to argue that the sentinels are mistaken and that he is, without a doubt, human. The captain replies by asking if he thinks she is foolish, since he has a bizarre appendage in the front region. The young man is completely speechless upon understanding her insinuation. Panicking, he yells that this is just due to the fact that he is male. Believing it to be a lie, the woman raises her leg and disregards the excuse. It seems she deems it essential to subject the captive to an even more severe torment. Noticing the incoming attack, the young man raises his handcuffed arms, seeking defense. Arya attacks mercilessly, warning that his muscles and bones would be shattered by the imposed humiliation. Being crushed on the floor, he keeps declaring that he is telling the truth. However, the young man notices that he doesn't suffer the unbearable pain threatened by the captain. On the contrary, the sole of the woman's foot seemed to be much softer than he supposed. Perplexed by the lack of response, the warrior finds it bizarre that the prisoner doesn't roar or dissipate magic. In the meantime, the hero pays attention to the scent of leather and perfume, noticing the girl's proximity. Furious with the silence, Arya asks if he is bravely resisting the punishment. Determined to break the captive's resistance, she applies more force to evaluate his limit. With his face totally pressed, the young man starts to experience a very distinct sensation of pain. Suddenly, the leader is startled to notice a bizarre energy vibrating. The other sentinels despair as they realize the captain's magical power was draining uncontrollably. Perplexed, the knight notices her energy disappearing swiftly. The most unbelievable part was that the captive was pulling all the vitality to himself. Immediately, she steps back in a hurry to break the link. The recruits rush over to check on the leader's condition. Ensuring she maintained control, she tries to understand the reason for the technical failure against the creature. The magical power should have evaporated from the inside out, instead of being absorbed in that weird way. Evaluating the scenario, the woman concludes that the prisoner suffered no deterioration. On the contrary, the young man ended up producing very favorable emotions from the abuse. Experiencing an immense power coursing through his body, he finally stands up. At that moment, a hidden mechanism turns on and the stone locks break without effort. The sentinels sound the alarm upon realizing the intruder has freed himself. A blue panel informs him that the feelings generated toward the opponent would be transformed into weaponry. Looking at the captain, he hears the order given to the subordinates to block the exits. Quickly, the knight draws her blade, preparing for the fight. Meanwhile, the young man's interface points out a gigantic emotional disturbance. Driven by anger, Arya directs her magic into her sword. Advancing against the captive, she vows to show the real meaning of terror. Noticing he had no escape, the hero adopts a defensive stance to survive. However, thousands of red boxes appear warning of a systemic failure. Completely disoriented by the mess, the young man notices the interface was crashing completely. Apparently, the system froze exactly when it locked onto the opponent. Taking advantage of the opening, the captain plants her feet on the floor to launch a brutal strike. Watching from afar, the elf says she has never seen the leader so angry and that the intruder was doomed. Surrounded by error messages, the young man tries to activate the magic, but doesn't succeed. Charging forward, the warrior warns she won't waste such an opportunity. Unarmed, he decides he will battle until the bitter end with his fists. However, the power of the initial clash is gigantic and brutally throws him backward. With the attack, the program recognizes a very strong emotion and shatters the barrier holding him. Forcing an energy conversion, a radiant flash manifests in his hands. A burst of energy clashes in the middle of the room, separating the adversaries. As soon as the mist clears, Arya is startled to see the prisoner armed. Holding a strange pulsing blade, the young man finally has a means of protection. Gripping the hilt tightly, he prepares to strike back with maximum intensity. The peculiar sword trembles with such vigor that the noise echoes in the room. Absolutely perplexed, Arya experiences a bizarre sensation crossing her body. Clash produces a colossal blast of energy. Using the momentum of the attack, the young man roughly throws the captain far away. Li Lin points his brand new weaponry at her, ready to continue the fight. The violet item keeps emitting a continuous and intimidating tremor. Unable to stay on her feet, the woman is thrown backward. She falls heavily on the floor, letting out a groan of dissatisfaction. Holding firm, the young man notices he can feel everything the blade touches, even if injured. Both face each other again in the center of the detention area. Using her weapon for support, Arya remains kneeling and breathless. She tries to stand up but notices she is unable to gather strength. Touching her own leg, the captain realizes her magic was consumed by the sudden numbness. With her heartbeat racing, she assumes the captive used some unfair trick to steal her abilities. Despite the trembling, the warrior forces herself to get up, resolved to use her wrath to dissipate the sensation and regain her energy. Surrounded by electrical energy, the captain warns that basic attacks won't appease her anger. Smiling with conviction, the young man praises the weapon and notes that his escape is tied to it. He takes a fighting stance, warning that the knight will not get away. Quickly, Arya charges like thunder through the room. She demands the magical creature disappear forever. Amazed, the young man notices the rival's sword has grown and is now shooting lightning. The two armaments clash with force. Pushed downwards, Li Lin strives hard to resist the weight of the attack. The woman forces the sword, threatening to cut the intruder in half. However, the strange rod manages to stop the powerful attack. The friction between the armaments scatters sparks everywhere. At that moment, the young man commands his weapon to pulse with more intensity. Experiencing the vibration in her body, Arya loses her strength and exposes herself once more. The sudden impact makes the warrior retreat in terror. Taking advantage of the opening, Li Lin pins the woman to the wall, demanding she not underestimate human fury. Exerting a colossal force, the young man prepares for the next action. The impact obliterates a piece of the wall behind the knight. Confident, he yells that his emotions were superior and granted him victory. The young man inhales deeply, trying to catch his breath after the exhaustion. Suddenly, his eyes widen as he notices something risky. Arya retaliates the blow brutally, mocking the captive for talking so much nonsense while at a disadvantage. With that, the program indicates an emotional spike, making the young man's weapon interact. He is pushed severely, barely managing to defend against the leader's strength. The warrior readies a front kick, while he desperately asks her not to aim at that spot. However, the attack hits dead on, throwing the young man to the other end of the arena. Feeling a tingling in his hand, the hero notices the tremor is so strong he can barely hold the weapon. To land on his feet, ready to follow up the battle against the commander. Showing off the rod altered with barbs, he warns that hers isn't the only sword that can grow. Completely out of breath, Arya feels her muscles give way, noticing her magic disappearing again. Sweating profusely, she tries to regulate her breathing to sustain her high concentration and anger. Without backing down, the captain runs swiftly across the rocky floor. In a distressed swing, she demands all her energy to return at once. However, the barbed rod stops the blade's path with a muffled sound. With his eyes glowing in a scarlet hue, the young man warns he won't let such an opportunity pass. He commands full power to the weaponry, sending a shockwave that makes his opponent roar. Completely disoriented, the knight questions if she will suffer that humiliation one more time. Fighting bravely, she swears not to be defeated by a beast, focusing on her rage to neutralize the effect. The clash of powers creates a whirlwind of energy in the center of the prison. In the external area, the other guards struggle not to fall due to the strong winds. The power of the blast ends up launching several recruits far away. Putting his all into the attack, the young man pushes the weapon against his rival. The captain is thrown upward, experiencing the strong vibrations sweep through her entire body. With the shock, she terrifiedly notices that her wrath was about to fade entirely. A colossal explosion of blue and purple light obliterates the prison floor. Rocks and fragments are launched in all directions due to the force of the strike. Far from there, the citizens panic at the tremor and point toward the interrogation room. The commander completely loses control and falls abruptly toward the ground. She collides violently against the freezing floor, completely unprotected. Beaten and breathless, the warrior can barely move after the impact. Observing his fallen rival, the young man breathes in relief and deduces he won the combat. System screens confirm the triumph, rewarding the hero with powers and a level up. However, exhaustion takes its toll and he ends up falling to his knees. Experiencing tremors in his legs, he realizes he used excessive strength and needs to flee the location immediately. With that, severe knocks echo from the door, with someone yelling in distress for the leader. Aware that he would be a vulnerable target, the young man runs through the corridors seeking an escape. On the outside, the sentinels realize the room was magically locked and decide to call for help. In the meantime, the hero swiftly escapes through the darkness, leaving the prison. Suddenly, an elegant silhouette approaches the unconscious knight in the center of the ruin. The newcomer aims her gaze at her subordinate pinned on the stones. Wielding an imposing blade, the mysterious woman observes the scene in silence. Waking up with effort, Arya awakens absolutely perplexed by the recent events. Still pinned on the stones, she lets out a murmur of pain upon seeing the tall figure right in front of her. Startled by the apparition, the captain notices that the one who came to her rescue was none other than her mother. With this, the soldiers run to help the commander, panicking as they ask if she let the creature escape. Suddenly, a colossal beast destroys the walls of the room with extreme brutality, causing panic among the soldiers. Seeking to stop the monster, the combatants notice their strikes don't harm the shell and request immediate reinforcements. Watching the creature advance out of control, the sentinel tries to hold the defense to prevent the danger from entering the city. However, before the worst happens, Arya's mother appears tearing through the air and lands a formidable attack on the invader. Landing safely, the enigmatic woman watches the creature shake in pain after suffering the frontal blow. Without allowing a reaction, she jumps once more and delivers a devastating kick straight to the beast's skull. With the violent impact, the immense beast is crushed against the rocky floor, remaining completely paralyzed. Comforted, the recruits celebrate the appearance of leader Margarita, aware that no opponent can stand against her. Pinned against the structure, the beast begins to experience an extreme level of degradation that totally debilitates its body. This strange method causes the creature's power to collapse and begin detonating from the inside out. In a few moments, the beast is completely fragmented, while the leader gracefully jumps away from the explosion. With the danger completely eradicated, the beast's skull tumbles to the floor, pierced by the sheer power of the final attack. Perplexed by the colossal strength, the guards look at the destruction and comment on how easily the blow pierced the armor. Calm after resolving the issue, Margarita walks peacefully through the combat area, ignoring the remains. The combatants sigh in relief and conclude that the commander's presence guarantees the city's triumph. Apprehensive about the escalation of invasions, the commander informs that she must discuss security with the queen urgently. At that very moment, a recruit advances anxiously toward her to report a disastrous fact. Paying attention to the report, she becomes aware that the interrogated captive managed to escape maximum security. Far from the shattered prison, Li Lin walks stealthily through the wide streets, dodging the giant inhabitants. Looking at the chaotic movement, the MC understands he is the only man in that universe and grasps the reason for the uproar. Hidden by a dark cloak, the young man questions the whereabouts of the hidden deity who dispatched him to that hostile environment. Finding everything increasingly bizarre, he finds it unusual not to have discovered any clues about who summoned him. Putting the questions aside, he focuses on his active system and decides to look for the guild to get funds. However, before advancing, a squad of knights runs by a short distance from his makeshift shelter. Aware that it would be fatal to be caught again, the young man concludes that the ideal tactic is to stay away from the patrols. Entering a discreet shop, he is welcomed by a strong merchant who provides all kinds of items for explorers. Immediately, the shop owner notices something unusual and orders the mysterious buyer not to move. Unceremoniously, she approaches quickly and presses the young man's chest vigorously, leaving him completely terrified. Intrigued by the shape, the woman warns that his chest lacks volume and that any protection would require custom tailoring. Trying to hide his tension, Li Lin steps back slightly, refuses the purchase, and asks for the location of the Adventurers Guild. Pointing to the outside of the shop, the seller advises that he just needs to go straight down the street and turn the corner to reach the place. Expressing gratitude for the brief answer, the hero leaves swiftly while the owner yells a peculiar piece of advice about nutrition. Returning to the shattered prison, Margarita inspects the colossal crack in the structure and asks how her daughter allowed the escape. Absolutely blushing, Arya explains that she employed her unique humiliation tactic. However, the magic had the opposite effect. Being a veteran commander, the mother assures that this only happened because the girl's focus wavered during the interrogation. Overtaken by remorse for the amateur mistake, the captain begs for forgiveness and tries to find a way to explain her error. Noticing her hair's emotional condition, Margarita changes her tone and calms the combatant, stating that the responsibility was not hers. However, the leader acts with brutal honesty and admits to having overestimated the captain's skills to face that level. Getting straight to the point, she explains that the young woman acts on impulse too much and ends up allowing anger to erase her real purpose. Looking at the containment fragments on the floor, the mother takes a deep breath and deduces that the breakout could not be prevented. Swearing to fix the ensuing chaos, the commander warns that genuine vigor demands logic and that she herself will pursue the intruder. Opposing the superior order, Arya demands to solve the setback on her own to restore her dignity as a leader. However, Margarita blocks the attitude immediately, pointing out that the daughter messed up in front of everyone and lost the unit's credibility. Furious with the unreal accusation, the warrior justifies that she didn't tremble out of dread, but because the enemy magic paralyzed her body. Disregarding the strategic justifications, the commander guarantees she has a mind of steel and tells the captain to go take care of the house plants. Feeling demoted to a useless beginner, Arya clenches her hands violently, experiencing an immense disappointment. Far from the military conflict at the castle, Lilin finally reaches the exuberant facade of the Explorers Guild. Opening the heavy gates, the young man enters the facility and notices the central space is scarcely deserted. Believing he took the wrong path, he raises his voice at the reception and declares he is a hero looking for tasks. At that moment, the sound of refined footsteps echoes in the hallway just as someone heads to the counter. A red-haired attendant appears with papers and asks if the foreigner is also seeking to vanquish the Demon King. Using a little white lie to cover up, Lilin nods, but finds out that the search parties left days ago. Changing the strategy to take regular missions, the young man awkwardly confesses that he doesn't have the guild's official permit. With a lot of empathy, the receptionist explains that he only needs to finish any random task to show his capability and obtain the document. Pointing to the bulletin board, she points out that the only options left are extremely dangerous missions. Looking at the easiest poster given by the employee, Lilin is startled to notice that the bounty target was identical to him. Inspecting the wanted paper carefully, the young man notices that the local forces had already placed a bounty on him. Without thinking about the consequences, he aggressively pulls the paper from the board so as not to raise suspicion with the attendant. Leaving the guild quickly, the young man deduces that his only way out now is to take on that absurd risk. Meanwhile, in the central square, Margarita walks peacefully among the inhabitants, demanding once again that her hair return home. Completely stubborn about the context, the captain reiterates that she is in great condition and will not allow her mother to fix her failure. Sheltered in a narrow alley nearby, Lilin hears the bickering and panics when he notices both were walking his way. Watching the commotion on the street, the locals say the young warrior was evidently provoked by the commander to act that way. Realizing the main path was closed off, the hero plans a secondary route through the dark streets aiming to escape. The huge courtyard of the city-state was absolutely packed with civilians, complicating any attempt at a fast getaway. Making matters worse, he notices that the hunting party was already surrounding all the streets adjacent to the heart of the city. Soon the guards get close to the captain and report in disappointment that they found no clues in the east sector. Reasoning tactically, Arya concludes that the wanted man couldn't have gone far and his ordinary look helps with the disguise. Leaning against the stone structure of the alley, Lilin holds his breath as the combatants walk right past him. Directing them to the adjacent routes, the commander splits the hunting troop and warns she will inspect the darkest alleys alone. As soon as the patrol turns the opposite corner, the young man exhales, completely comforted by having escaped that fatal ambush. Camouflaged by the cloak, Lilin focuses on finding an elevated spot to visualize the fortress exits. In this way, the young man spots a gigantic obelisk standing out in the center of the urban environment. Without delay, he concludes this will be his immediate destination to map out his escape. However, before making any move, someone yanks his clothing roughly from behind. Turning his neck, the young man freezes upon noticing that leader Margarita was right there. Absolutely shaken, he can hardly believe he was intercepted in such a trivial manner. Looking at the intruder, the warrior observes his short stature and labels him a little monster. Displaying a colossal power, the leader lifts the captive into the air using only one hand. Being lifted by force, the young man squirms, trying to break free from her grasp. In a violent action, Margarita brutally throws the target onto the courtyard floor. With the loud crash, the sentinels get startled, asking what had happened. The fall scatters dirt all over the area while the young man's hood slips back. Touching the floor, the leader warns that he is the danger in question and orders them to step back. Understanding the situation, the combatants aim their weaponry at the downed enemy. Experiencing the pain of the impact, Lilin presses his hand against the rubble, trying to catch his breath. Getting up with difficulty, he grumbles about the discovery and finds the look of his new adversaries bizarre. With that, the subordinates charge in, demanding the creature vanish for good. Using his dexterity, the young man dodges a brutal attack coming from above. Without hesitating, he grabs the base of the rival weaponry to block the action. Using the enemy's momentum, the hero disarms the patroller and delivers a precise kick. At the same instant, another combatant launches a strike. However, he uses the stolen rod to defend himself. With the system on, the young man enjoys a martial resource to gain the upper hand. Spinning the spear, he launches a wide attack that hits several sentinels simultaneously. Being repelled backwards, the subordinates seek support so they don't tumble to the floor. Perplexed by what happened, one of them notices that the intruder refrained from harming them in a lethal way. Standing in the courtyard, the young man reiterates he is not a danger and just wishes to leave peacefully. However, he points the weapon and threatens to counterattack if they insist on being hostile toward him. Watching everything from a distance, Margarita doesn't lose focus and orders the troop to subdue the individual. Fulfilling the directive, the knights advance in a new joint assault. Noticing the failure of the dialogue, Li Lin summons a colossal energy sword in the environment. Absolutely frightened, the warriors back away, observing the resemblance to Captain Aria's power. Through a brutal movement, the hero unleashes a shockwave that repels the patrol. Indifferent to the strong wind, the commander marches with serenity through the wreckage. Aware of the proximity of the genuine danger, the young man grips the weapon tightly, waiting for the worst. In a fraction of a second, the leader summons her arcane blade and delivers a fatal blow. The impact shatters the hero's weapon, while the interface communicates the depletion of the resource. Forcing the sword, the commander mocks his evasion and states that the place is not a playground. Losing his balance, the young man is forced to step back quickly to avoid the impact. Taking advantage of the space, the leader goes on the offensive with an attack capable of destroying any protection. Realizing his disadvantage, he turns his back and flees quickly, letting out a taunt. Using the local structures, the young man jumps over the obstacles in the courtyard to get away. However, the woman merely runs like lightning across the ground, crushing the blockades. With a formidable leap, Margarita catches the fugitive in mid-air and squeezes his face with fury. Holding the captive pinned, the warrior confidently boasts of her own efficiency. Looking at the young man, she warns that he will suffer the consequences for all that audacity. Unable to answer, the young man widens his eyes, experiencing being dragged toward the ground. Touching the ground with a dull thud, the leader crushes the target against the floor, demanding that he perish. Downed and panting, the hero experiences a suffocating pressure and his face starts to blush. The fact was that the leader was brutally forcing her straight leg against the captive's face. Observing the moment, the subordinates mention that the leader mounted the beast's skull. Waiting for the debilitation, Margarita finds it bizarre that the boy doesn't manifest any loss of magic. Resolved to reach the conclusion, she moves the limb, imposing even more force on his head. Noticing the young man twitch, the warrior smiles complacently, believing he couldn't withstand the suffering. Sustaining the posture, she demands to know the goal of the invasion in order to grant a quick end. However, the young man raises his gaze cheerfully and declares he is feeling fantastically well. Absolutely confused, the knights watch as the commander gets infuriated. Enraged, she warns that the captive will experience the real weight of the punishment. Using all her body mass, the woman crushes the intruder into the stone, ensuring he doesn't escape. With his face mashed, the hero gasps for breath, feeling the heat of the opponent's body. Far away, the sentinels celebrate, believing the young man's noises were out of panic. However, Margarita starts to break out in a cold sweat, noticing something bizarre happening with her body. Jing, she experiences a peculiar vibration crossing her legs involuntarily. Suddenly, a lot of cerulean energy starts gushing uncontrollably from the leader, terrifying the guard. Perplexed, the woman notices that her energy was being sucked away in an inverted dynamic. Without understanding the cause, the leader raises her trembling hand, observing the magic dissipate. In a distressed manner, she attempts to slightly move her leg away from the intruder's face. However, before she can back away, Li Lin grabs the warrior's footwear, glowing with an obscure power. Using the concentrated power, the young man repels the commander, breaking the steadiness of her stance. Surprised by the atypical strength, she loses her stability and leaves herself wide open. With the system alerts, the hero activates a barrier that resonates with the rival. Taking advantage of the chance, he launches an energy blast aimed directly upward. The attack hits the warrior violently, guaranteeing that the impact would destroy any defense. The power of the blast lifts the leader off the ground and launches her far away across the courtyard. Being thrown backwards, Marguerite experiences a severe paralysis, nullifying all her strength. Crashing against the stone, the commander falls to the floor with a red face and totally incapacitated. Hurled into the sky, Margarita experiences a bizarre force coming from her back, generating a shock that makes her body tremble uncontrollably. Trying to break the push, the leader plants her feet on the rock, sliding until she manages to stop the sudden action. When the dust settles, the two exchange glances again in the ruined courtyard while she inhales deeply to restore her balance. Wielding his newly acquired defense, Lilin notices he won't have the means to escape unless he subdues the rivals for good. With that, one of the guards gets close, frightened, warning that the leader's face was completely red after the recent explosion. Breathless and feeling her body boil, the woman simply replies that everything is fine, trying to hide her peculiar state. However, deep down, the warrior finds the condition suspicious, observing that her heartbeat was accelerating abnormally. Remembering past fights, the leader acknowledges she had suffered blows before, but the only previous sensation was always physical damage. Staring at the young man from afar, she deduces that the intruder's magic held a completely distinct outcome from the usual. Suddenly, a blue-haired sentinel jumps with her weapon, surprising the boy with a swift attack. Swiftly, the hero raises his defense tool and manages to stop the brutal thrust, triggering a success warning. With the failure of the assault, the recruit is thrown back violently, letting out a yell as she feels her muscles give way. Watching what happened, Margarita understands the logic of the counterstrike, noting that the pang quickly turns into a numbness in the legs. Experiencing her own altered body, the warrior presumes that this creature's power is capable of draining all energy from the opponent. Comforted by narrowly escaping the blow, the young man moves forward, aware that he will need attack weaponry to pierce the barrier. Evaluating the context, the young man concludes that he previously received a blade for desiring to strike, but now obtained a shield for seeking protection. The moment he dodges another spear, he realizes that his soul's genuine emotions immediately impact the created item. Keeping the pace, the young man parries another violent attack, forcing the defensive power to act in his favor. Sporting a determined look, the hero has the conviction that he will completely control the anomaly if he maintains his concentration. Taking advantage of their superior numbers, the Sentinels launch a joint assault, but end up having their attacks blocked. Confident in his defense, Lilin provokes the combatants, calling them all to attack at once. Quickly, a storm of attacks heads his way, producing an insane series of effective blocks. The defense's ricochet generates a shockwave that throws the attackers back aggressively. Unable to balance themselves, the warriors collapse awkwardly on the rocky courtyard floor. Absolutely out of breath and feeling weak, one of the guards hears a colleague ask if she was severely injured. With a blushing face, the subordinate admits to having lost her vitality with a racing heart and muscle flaccidity. Apparently, the same outcome spread throughout the entire troop, leaving several combatants pinned down and grumbling from exhaustion. Staring at the exhausted platoon, the leader questions herself about the situation, believing that her guards feared the clash. With that, one of the warriors tries to report the scenario, warning that any direct attack would be futile and risky. Disregarding the warning, the commander recalls that their duty is to protect the city and demands they all advance with her. Confident in the plan, a recruit points out that the enemy is cornered and support from other sectors would arrive soon. Motivated by the leader, another sentinel raises her arm with her weapon, confirming that the commander was absolutely right. Preparing for the fight, the imposing leader inhales to concentrate her strength and prevent fatigue from winning. In a memorable leap, the warrior tears through the air and lands from top to bottom, ready to annihilate the intruder. The brutal impact meets the young man's tool harshly, producing severe sparks upon contact. Taking advantage of the diverted focus, the rest of the squad runs united to support the leader in direct combat. Swiftly, the commander launches another side attack. However, the program indicates a flawless defense again. Rushing her actions, Margarita seeks to keep the tension high to instill bravery in the guards. Despite feeling her body tingle, she promises to never show weakness in front of her platoon. Clenching her jaw, the woman exerts colossal strength to hold back any noise in the face of that strange paralysis. Spotting a flaw, the commander warns that every time the boy attacks with the shield, he ends up exposing his own rear. Without wasting time, she enjoys the opening and lands an accurate kick, forcing the hero to retreat. Landing firmly on the floor after escaping the risk, the warrior establishes a safety margin to evaluate the unfolding events. Inspecting her own body, she notices with relief that she did not suffer from any paralysis for avoiding the enemy weapon. Understanding how the shield works, the leader yells for the platoon to dodge the artifact and direct their strikes at the boy. Realizing his strategy was understood, the young man lets out a sound of discontent, aware that he lost his trump card. Suddenly, the sharp blade of a long weapon tears through the wind straight at him. Operating on instinct, the hero jumps far back, dodging the attack by a very narrow margin. However, Another sentinel was already waiting for him and informs that she found the ideal opening to hit him. Letting out an intimidating yell, the soldier charges with momentum, aiming to end the issue quickly. In a fast action, the boy pivots his axis and manages to redirect the item to ensure another strong defense. Being pushed aggressively, the warrior suffers from the reverse effect and is launched into the air, feeling her legs wobble. Despite the obstacles, the platoon keeps tightening the area in the courtyard, forcing the target to keep moving. A whirlwind of attacks collides with the metallic surface, exacting a colossal toll on the young man. Totally fatigued, he concludes that the adversaries opted for swift strikes just to drain his vital energy. Staring at the rival's exhaustion, the commander lets out a soft breath, confident that the exhaustion plan was correct. Ready for the decisive strike, the woman gathers a lot of energy, covering herself with a formidable electric glow. In a fraction of time, she crosses the environment with an abnormal speed, dragging the floor with her strength. The displacement kicks up a lot of dirt and fragments, causing a trail of damage that startles even her own troop. Taken completely by surprise by the speed, the hero widens his eyes as he observes the imminent danger. Advancing precisely, the leader unleashes a linear and mortal attack, forcing the young man to seek a distressed protection. Warned by the error message, the boy understands that the extreme speed of his rival completely destroyed his defense. Experiencing her sword meeting an obstacle, the warrior celebrates inwardly, sure that she finally hit the intruder. With the inevitable thud, the blade wounds the young man's arm, tearing his clothes and creating a moment of intense pressure. Landing gracefully post-attack, the commander is disappointed to notice she failed the fatal blow and didn't manage to win the fight right there.